So who we got this week?
Scott Mantz.
I like Scott.
Oh, he's fantastic.
I really sort of got to meet him properly quite recently, really. And I did not realise that he had worked at Creation for a decade.
Yeah.
Prior to us, coming on the scene.
Yeah.
And he knew Gary and Adam when they were almost kids, and he was like, a tender 11, 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And I think he wrote them and said,
Is there anything for me?
Yeah, I could help along. He's just a sweetheart, and what really translates about him, and I love this about people who end up making a career out of being a fan, and he's just a big fan of whatever he's talking about.
He's made a career out of his joy.
Yeah, and that really is, if only actors could feel the same way.
It's hard for us to call up someone and go, do you have anything for me?
So I'm looking forward to this chat. He moderated our panel in Vegas this year, and he did a great job with that. He's just a really, stand-up guy. And
he's amazing.
The joy comes through.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah. Please, this is what we call our call to action. We really need your support. I can't say it any more clearer than that. So please find us at the Decon Chamber on YouTube and on Spotify and Apple
Podcasts
and thedeconchamber.com.
Yep.
But the best way you can support us, really, is to become a Patreon member at patreon.com. And for a small amount of money a month, you can help us keep these lights on and keep this show going. We know you love it, so please step up and help us do that.
Join us Sundays at 11 o'clock Pacific time on YouTube for new episodes, and we've got some great ones coming.
We sure have.
So pay attention, look at the website, it'll let you know when we are starting, so we can't wait to bring it to you.
Thank you, guys.
Hey guys, stick around at the end of the episode for Tricky Trek Trivia, where one of you will win $20.
The show has begun. Set your phasers to fun. You're guaranteed for a trip. Trip, trip, trip. Step into the decon with Connor and Dom. It's the Decon Chamber.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Trekkies and Trekkers, welcome back to another episode of the Decon Chamber. I am your co-host, Dominic Keating, joined as always by my bestie, my fellow co-host and old castmate, Connor Trinneer,
Hey-yo.
in the chair. So this week, we have got Mr. Showbiz himself. He is a film critic, a writer, producer, an event moderator. He's a non-stop nerd, and he's a bloody good mate. Mr. Scott Mantz is here. Thank you so much, Scott.
You.
Guys, thank you so much for having us. What an honor to be here, sitting across from you guys.
I would echo the same thing.
And honestly, the nerd factor is a badge of honor.
It sure is now.
Absolutely.
It sure is.
It's happened. I mean, in 20 years, it's finally happened. And I kind of regret that I'm not.
You are by proxy.
You definitely are.
By proxy.
You're part of it anyway.
You grew up in Philadelphia.
Yes, sir.
Not a sports fan, as we were just talking off camera. I know, and he's got the Mets hat on.
The game will be over by the time you all see this, but they're playing each other
They're playing the
right
Phillies right now.
That's how much I love you all and love him that I'm sitting in this chair.
You grew up in Northeast Philly.
Correct.
Yeah?
That's right, Northeast Philly.
Right, and then you get to come to LA. You come and work for Creation.
That's right.
And now, did we know you in the? Were you our years when
I
we were
was
doing?
already gone by the time you guys
feeling.
started making the rounds in
When did
2001.
you start?
I started in 1991.
Okay.
But my very first Star Trek convention ever was on my 11th birthday on November 21st, 1979.
Wow. In New York.
At the Philadelphia Center Hotel. Downtown at 17th and JFK. And the guest was Jimmy.
Was
Really?
it?
Jimmy Doohan.
God
yeah.
bless.
Yeah.
I met him one time,
Yeah.
right at the beginning.
Yeah.
That was the only time I met him. Was that Adam and Gary's
It
convention?
sure was.
Yeah,
Adam
Malin
Malin and Gary Berman.
Gary
I've known
Berman.
those guys. I mean, I've known them just because I went to their conventions since I was 11 years old.
That's crazy.
And so, grew up obviously big Star Trek fan, and I'll tell you how all that in a sec. But when I went away to Penn State, so Next Generation is already on by this time, and it was in its third and fourth season when I was a junior and senior at Penn State, and I studied business administration. I hated it. First job I got out of school was a business job, a finance job. I hated it. And I was living in Philly, and I'm wearing a suit every day, and I'm going out to my car every day during lunch, and I'm taking a nap because I was so depressed.
Oh.
And I hadn't been to a convention of any kind in like 5 years because I got a serious girlfriend. I went away to school. I got into that whole world with school. And we would watch Next Gen every Saturday night. And, I liked the show, and then I really fell in love with it in the third season. But I get this flyer in the mail when I'm already back at home in Philly after I got out of school, because I had signed the creation mailing list in 1979. And once you sign that mailing list,
You're on.
you are on it for the rest of
Is it
your
like the
life.
Scientologists?
my parents, my mom still gets flyers
does
sometimes.
she really?
Yeah, she
Fantastic.
does.
Oh, that's awesome.
So now when I was going to the conventions between 79 and 86,
How old are Adam and Gary at this time? Are they like 17 years old?
let's see, when I started working there in 91, I was 22. They're, I think, 13 or 14 years older than me.
So they were early 20s at the very most when
They-
you
yeah,
were
they were-
11
Yeah.
going to that first creation.
They started
event.
creation
Right.
in 1971. They were like 13 or 14 years old.
That's unbelievable.
And look what they
It's
built.
incredible.
With Star Trek and the
Yeah.
X-Files and
Supernatural.
Supernatural.
Vampire Diaries,
Yeah.
Battlestar Galactica. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And those guys, Adam and Gary, they're like family to me. They really are. So I get this. Now, when I was going to the conventions, Shatner, Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, they were not doing the conventions. They did the movies, and that was kind of it. So I get this flyer in the mail in the summer of 1991, and I open up the flyer, and there's this picture of Shatner, doing that pose in the captain's chair from third season of TOS. And I'm like, oh my God, Shatner's doing a convention in Philly. I gotta go. So, when I was going to the conventions, I was like one of the youngest people there. Most of the people there were much, much older than me. So now it's 5 years later.
Are you going alone? Did mom and dad
yeah.
let you go alone?
Dad would drop me off. Bye. See you in 8 hours. But
It's brilliant.
Even though he was like the sports guy, he knew what I loved, and he let me be who I was.
Yeah, that's great.
So great dad.
Were you dressing up at all? Or
No,
that wasn't a thing.
Was that a
yet?
thing even then? Where people?
It was.
It was.
Right.
I didn't start dressing up until I got the Captain Kirk outfit, and I only wore it on Halloween, and I still do. I mean, come on, that's
Come
the
on.
day,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
So I'm like so excited to go to this convention, and the first thing I noticed were all these young fans running around in Next Gen uniforms, and I was like, oh, this is different, because I wasn't the youngest guy there anymore, So I'm sitting there, I'm
The
watching
next
Shatner.
generation.
Yeah, it was the look at you go.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. So I'm sitting there.
Thank you. Thank you.
And like when Shatner came out, I expected him to be kind of very serious, like Captain Kirk. But as you know, and as most everybody watching this knows, if they've seen him at a convention, he's at this ball of energy.
Yeah.
So much energy. He's so funny.
He's a
And I'm-
raconteur, yeah.
and I'm sitting there, it's like 2,000 people in the room. I'm looking around going, you know what? If I could work for a place like this, that would be really, really awesome. So I wrote a cover letter. I sent my resume to the creation office. And when I was at work, I would call, because I was looking for a job anyway. So I called my answer machine every day, and I get this message from Gary Berman. Hey, Scott, we got your resume. Give me a call. So I called them up.
Are they in New York still?
They're still in Mineola, New York, on Long Island.
Right.
So he says, look, just so you know, so this is like September. And he says, early next year in 1992, we're moving to California so we can help the company grow, get involved with other properties besides just Star Trek. So if we hire you and bring you to New York, and we like you, we'll move you to LA. If we don't like you, no hard feelings. So I thought, they're going to fly me to California and put me, move me out there if it all works out. So I went, I met them. They, Adam Mayo and hired me on the spot. So
Wow.
October 26th, or was like 4 days after Gene died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was watching, Next Gen that week before, and I found out that Gene passed away, and I went to work for them in New York, and long story short, it all worked out. They moved me to California.
What sort of duties did you have to do? What did
I was their controller.
Right.
So I was their finance guy. I handled the accounting
So
and
the business thing came in handy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Dom,
Well
let
done,
me tell
Dad.
you something. For years, I would say, man, if I could go back to school and major in something else, it definitely would have been film studies.
Right.
But if I had done that, creation would not have hired me.
Right.
that.
Right.
Because I had the finance accounting background, that's why they hired me.
That's a
And-
funny game, isn't it?
It really
It
is.
really is.
It worked out for the best. But, so I worked there for 9 years. I left in the beginning of 2000, which was right before you guys
Right.
came on with Enterprise. And
Making a fortune.
what's that?
Making a fortune.
But over those years, when Next Gen ended and then DS9 came around and Voyager came around, it was really a fun time. That peak '90s when there was so much Star Trek
There was a
content.
convention a weekend, kind of, wasn't it?
In '93 and '94, I will never forget. We did 130 Star Trek conventions a year. Okay.
Were they getting the stars to show up? I mean, there was still a sort of sense that you're going to do those things, even with our cast.
Well,
I mean, it's not the same landscape anymore. Now it's de rigueur.
Well, what I remember vividly about those days was the guests, the cast members. They did their stage appearance. Maybe they would do an autograph session, and that was it.
That was it.
But they didn't like nowadays. And I think this is great. Like the barrier is completely gone. You're all sitting in the dealer's room.
Right.
Yes.
posing with the fans.
Yeah.
And I remember the first convention I did as an employee with Creation. It was in L.A. It was before we moved here, but I flew out here with them to kind of get the lay of the land and start looking around for an apartment and all that kind of thing. And it was in November 11th and 12th, 1991, at the Airport Hilton. LA
yeah.
Airport Hilton. Gates McFadden was the guest for both days. And I remember she was a little nervous. She did, she'd been doing it for a while already, but she went on stage, she did her thing, and, she didn't really stick around like she does now.
Right.
Now she's completely comfortable with it. So are you, so is everybody.
Yeah.
And it's great.
I did my first convention with Gates. I think it was in Phoenix. And when we got to line up, sit down and do the autograph thing, she didn't know from a match. She went, "Are you fast?" And I was like, "Oh, watch me."
What was that like for you though? Like after the Next Gen cast and Voyager and Deep Space Nine, they're getting into the convention thing and everything like that. So when you guys came on, and you were doing the show, and you started doing the convention, was that something you're like, yeah, that's great?
Well, he was first
I
out
was
of the
first
gate.
out of the gate. I'd seen Trekkies, the documentary, and I'd seen there's an annuity here. I was nervous as hell for the Q&A bit. I thought I had to be a stand-up comedian for an hour on stage, and of course I actually had 20 minutes. I had a 20-minute bit. And then it went to questions, and it was like, okay, no, this is okay. And then the love, and you soak it up, man. And
Yeah,
about you?
I was terrified, and I wouldn't do one. The first one that I did was in Portland, Oregon, about 45 minutes from where I grew up, so that my parents could be in the audience.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and I remember coming into Portland and being ushered through the curtain by fully dolled out Klingons. And I was like, what on earth is this going to be like? And I really, I was so happy my parents were there because I could use them as my anchor. Yeah.
I gotta say, I remember so vividly when when I watched each show's premiere episode, you know, with Next Gen, it was like I was a sophomore and I blew off studying for a statistics exam so I could watch, you know, Encounter Farpoint.
Right.
And I totally got a D on the exam. But with you guys, it was right after 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
it
I
was-
just remember thinking, it's, you know, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but thank God this is happening. Like, thank God Star Trek is here.
his
if
dad
ever-
said that.
Yeah,
to
my
him.
father said this to me because,
Yeah.
and I've said this on the show before, and I say it at conventions as well, that when 9/11 happened, I remember thinking, what am I doing? You know, I'm on this TV show. I'm making no difference whatsoever. And I remember saying this to my father, and my dad said, yeah, I think you're absolutely wrong. I think that people need this Wednesday or Thursday night at 9 o'clock for
Just an hour.
just a connection to something that's not as awful as what's going on right now.
It was just so, it was exactly the right time. Because I remember when, you know, 9/11, of course everybody remembers that day. That night, there was a press screening. I was already working for Access Hollywood by this point. So there was a press screening for the movie Training Day, which, you know, Denzel won
Tough
his
film.
Yeah.
his second Academy Award.
right.
So I called the studio. I said, "Are you still having the screening tonight?" And they're like, "We're not sure." And I just said, "Well, if you do, I will definitely go. I just needed,
All right.
you know,
Some escape.
it was an escape."
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a heavy movie.
It's a huge heavy movie. Yeah.
You know, but with Enterprise, you know, now it was like every week, and it was, you know, throwback prequel, you know, to the show that got me into the whole thing in the first place. So there was that connection to it. And, you know, I had watched Quantum Leap, so I was already a
Right.
Scott Bakula fan. So it was
As a Star Trek fan, do you find it difficult to get the appetite for the new show, like some of the fans?
you mean like over the years with each new passing
Yeah.
show?
Are you an open book to it, or are you like,
The only time I was not an open book to a new Star Trek show was when they started talking about Next Generation.
Oh.
Because
right?
all that we had back in the 70s,
Right.
before motion picture even came out,
Right.
was this one show.
Right.
That's all we had, and that was what I watched night after night in syndication. Channel 17, WPHL, Channel 17, Philadelphia. So it was on 7 o'clock every night. And, you know, when TOS was on, 66 to 69, the ratings were decent, but obviously not great. Paramount hated it. NBC wanted to get rid of it. We all know the story.
Right.
But what makes me more proud than anything as a Star Trek fan is that I'm part of the syndication generation.
Same here.
The syndication generation is when Star Trek found its audience and it got popular enough for Paramount to start thinking, I think we made a mistake. We need to bring Star Trek back. That took too long to happen. You know, they were going to do Star Trek Phase 2. They went ahead and did motion picture, but then Rathacon came around. But that was, you know, like all the books that I read about Star Trek, the Compendium, the Making of Star Trek, the Concordance, it informed my life. Okay, it really did. So when they started talking about a Next Generation, I'm like, what? Huh?
What are you doing?
How dare you
Right.
replace Kirk
This
and
is
Spock?
sacrosanct. Yeah.
Totally.
Right.
But then I started watching, and I know the first 2 seasons of Next Gen aren't as great as the rest of it, but I still really liked it. And then when the 3rd season kicked in, when Michael Piller came on,
Right.
and Ron Moore, Brandon Braga, that gang.
The new blood.
Yeah, the Wild Bunch.
No
That-
disrespect to Mr. Roddenberry, and you know, but yeah,
That's when the show got great.
it was
You could
hanging
tell.
between 2 eras, wasn't it, in those first 2 seasons?
Oh my God,
you know?
it is night and day.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I'll never forget when I was up at Penn State and I saw the episode "Who Watches the Watchers." It's like a couple episodes into season 3, and you can see already how much more gravitas that Captain Picard has.
Right.
And that's when the show really found its footing. So every show after that, I was like, you know what? I was wrong to be opposed to the idea of New Trek. And then Deep Space Nine, well, we're going to shake it up a bit. It's not on a starship. It's on a space station.
They ain't going nowhere.
They're not going anywhere. They're coming to us.
Yeah.
But I was like, let's go bring it on. I was like, let's go bring it on. And as a result, Deep Space Nine, because, Ira Stephen Bear, he was in between Next Gen and Voyager. They left him alone.
They did.
Yeah.
They left him alone.
They really did.
And that show is amazing.
It's amazing.
So same thing with Voyager.
Ron
But
Moore, they are great writers.
I was more excited, I think, when Enterprise came around because it was 100 years before TOS. Because okay, let's see how we got there. So I was more excited about that. But then Enterprise ended, and then Star Trek went away for a while, and then the JJ movie came around.
Right.
What'd you guys think of that?
I liked it.
I liked it, and when I think about it in hindsight, there's an element to it that's a little more smash bang special effects and less message about what the essence of, or the message that Star Trek is.
You're right. But at the same time,
It is an action movie. Yeah.
It's an action movie, but it's a great action movie.
But it's a weird movie in the sense that it reintroduces people you already know.
Yeah.
And you have to, though.
But I remember, so the first time I saw Star Trek 2009, JJ Abrams, it was April 21st, 2009. The movie opened on May 8th. But the Paramount people...
I noticed that you are very good with dates.
I'm great with dates, brother.
Do you have that ability to... Do you know what you were wearing? Are you one of those guys? What is that condition?
There's a Rain Man thing going on with movie release dates.
It is amazing.
So
Very good driver.
The publicists at Paramount, they knew that I was a crazy Star Trek fan, so they invited me to there were only 4 people in the audience at the Paramount Theater. Wow. 4 people. So
why?
So they just invited a few people to get an honest opinion. So there were 2 things running through my brain. One was, okay, so when Next Gen came around and the other shows came around, you're introducing a new crew. So whatever happens with the show, whether I like it or don't like it, I still have the original series. It's pure. It's always there. Right. I got my, DVDs and Blu-rays. I'm good. But now you're messing with my boys. Yeah. Now you're recasting Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and so on. So if anything goes wrong, you're going to taint this thing that I love so much. Yeah.
It's almost like listening to the radio. I never know I don't want to know what they look like. I listen to KCRW all the time. I have no idea what anyone looks like, and I do in my head, right? But I don't want to see them in reality.
I know what you mean. I know it shatters the illusion.
I don't know. Their voices are their voices. I know, what Madeline looks like, but I don't.
Madeline Brand,
but I have no idea what she looks like.
So the other thing is, you've seen the film. So there's that moment on the bridge. First of all, in the film, like Vulcan gets destroyed and Spock and Uhura have this relationship, which is hinted at in the Man Trap. I'm not gonna lie. So, but there's that moment on the bridge when Zachary Quinto was terrific in that.
He was.
Where he says, this Romulan ship from the future coming back to the past has altered our timelines. The destinies that we were going to have been changed. And at that moment, I went, okay, I get it. So this is a different timeline. Out there in another universe, Shatner, Nimoy, and D. Kelly, they're still doing their thing. You still have the Guardian, the Tribbles, right? Harry Mudd, they're all out there. But whatever happens here, it's not going to mess with that. And it's a great action movie. I thought Chris Pine, Zach Quinto, and
great chemistry.
Carl Urban as McCoy.
Yeah.
When he sits down and goes, yeah, my wife took me for everything. All she left me were my bones. And I went, oh my God, that's great. But so those movies came and went. I think the third film, Star Trek Beyond, it made the least amount of money at the box office, which is why we haven't had a Star Trek movie since. Right. But I think the third movie is the one that feels like a Star Trek movie the most. The other two films, they're just great action films. But Star Trek Beyond, like Simon Pegg co-wrote the film.
He did, didn't he? Yes.
He did,
Yeah.
and he
Clever
wanted it to
writer.
be a throwback to TOS, which it kind of is, because all the characters splinter off into camps. You know, you have Spock and McCoy stuck together, you know, like in All Our Yesterdays. You have Kirk and Chekhov stuck together, like in Gamesters of Triskelion or Who Mourns for Adonais. So I really loved it, but it didn't do well. And then I get that. I remember I was at my desk at Access, and I see Variety posted an article with a picture of Kirk and Spock from Where No Man Has Gone Before. The article said, Star Trek is coming back to television. Guys, I lost my shit.
You jumped out of your seat.
I took the link and I posted it on Facebook. Am I allowed to drop the F-bomb?
Oh.
we have a mascot for it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I get this article, and I see this article. I posted it on my Facebook page, and all one word. It said, "Oh my." Yes. Boom. And Sonequa Martin Green.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
She is one of the finest actors
she
to
sure
grace
is.
a Star Trek soundstage.
Yeah.
Yep.
She is magnificent.
And best people.
That show took big swings.
Yeah, I did.
It did.
And I think what Kurtzman and Secret Hideout have done with these new shows, it's some fans might need some time to warm up to it.
I think you're right, and I've had a couple of conversations with them about that. And,
But
yeah.
remember, I just remember how opposed people were to Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
Initially.
Yeah.
Right.
Now they love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I think that the seasons of Voyager, Discovery, they went ahead 800 years. I mean, like, come on.
Crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that we suffered from the notion of oversaturation of having, 17 years straight of Star Trek. And,
Right.
And I wonder about that. Maybe Star Wars, and when Disney bought Star Wars and just splintered the whole thing up and made all these different shows, maybe that doesn't exist anymore. But, there is a possibility of, can you oversaturate anymore?
The answer is yes.
Yeah, you can, and God knows the tenure that Rick and Brannon had is unprecedented. They wrote 17 years of variation of a theme, and did they go to the well one too many times with the same water? A little bit, and our show was that show.
But Dominic, so did the original series.
Yeah.
There were a couple episodes, like there's the episode Arena, the Gorn,
Yeah.
where all the bridge crew, they're watching the views, they're basically watching the fight on TV.
Right.
But then you get to the third season with the Savage Curtain, where Kirk and Spock team up with Abraham Lincoln and Surak, right? And they have to fight the other four. And then, a Yarnek from Excalibur is holding the bridge, the Enterprise hostage, and they're all watching it on the TV. It's like, oh, it's Arena again.
Right.
So it happens. It happens. And Gene Kuhn, who is probably the greatest writer-producer any Star Trek show ever had, he did that too.
He wrote Metamorphosis.
Yeah.
He wrote Metamorphosis.
And produced it.
Which is, as you know, that's my favorite
fave.
episode.
Yeah.
But Metamorphosis was the second episode produced for season 2 of the original series.
Right.
If you take Devil in the Dark from the first season with the Horta, Gene Kuhn wrote that. And when Gene Kuhn wrote that, he went from story outline to final draft in like 4 or 5 weeks. And no other Star Trek writer like Fontana or John D.F. Black or Steve Karabatsis, any of the original writing team had anything to do with Devil in the Dark. It was all Gene Kuhn. But in the episode, this Horta, this monster, it's like, we got to kill this thing because it's killing the miners.
Right.
But then, because of communication, Kirk realizes he was wrong. So then he tries to, tell the Horta we're not going to kill it, And that was the great thing about Kirk, is that he knew when he made a mistake.
Yeah.
But if you take Devil in the Dark and turn it into a love story, the result is Metamorphosis. Because in that episode, Metamorphosis, they're stranded on the planet with this energy force. They don't know what it is. The commissioner, played by the lovely Eleanor Donahue, is dying.
Yeah.
She's magnificent in this
Magnificent in it,
episode. So they're like, we got to get her to the Enterprise or she's going to die. Spock, let's kill the companion. But then that backfires when they try to electrocute the companion. And then McCoy says to Kirk, it's such a great line. He says, "You're a soldier so often, you forget that you're also a diplomat." And he says, try waving a carrot instead of a stick.
Right.
And the camera kind of zooms into Kirk, and he has this like ding, and he smiles, and he jumps into action. Spock, get the universal translator, see if you can fix it. And then that moment, this is what's great about Metamorphosis. The first half of the episode is very dramatic, very intense.
There's an enemy.
There's an enemy.
Yeah,
we got to kill
the
it.
entity's an enemy always. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't understand what it looks like. We've never seen it before.
And it's stranding us here. Yeah.
Right. Even though the whole thing is to explore strange new worlds, like we don't know what this thing is. We're trapped here. We got to kill it.
Well, they got to get the ambassador back.
We got it. And there's a race
Time's
against
a ticking
time
clock. Yes,
on
there you
top
go.
of it.
Right.
Like it's not just that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are trapped. Like this woman's going to die. We got to get her back fast.
Yeah.
Get off this planet. And then the moment that the episode completely pivots, and its the director of the episode, Ralph Senensky.
Senensky, yeah.
He did a beautiful job with this. So the moment that Kirk says to the companion, he says, "We wish to talk to you," and the companion is on top of Cochrane, and it moves off, and you hear the voice, and it's a female. Like in a split second, the entire tone flips.
The whole dynamic changes.
The whole dynamic
It's
changes.
a siren.
It becomes something really, really beautiful. But the two completely different tones work in the context of a perfect episode. And like when I was a kid, I thought Metamorphosis was like, I thought it was fine. It wasn't.
I was
going to
ask you, as a child, did you get the nuances of these philosophical stories?
If you love something,
because I
set
didn't.
it
I watched
free.
it
No,
as a
of
kid.
course
I was a
not.
big fan, but it was an action show in space and great colours.
I love Balance of Terror. I love
Right.
Doomsday Machine. I love the Tribbles. Piece of the Action's a lot of fun. But no,
So you've
Dom, I didn't.
revisited as an adult,
Oh, my
as
God.
it were, over the years.
When the DVDs came out, I went back and I rewatched, and now I'm in my 30s, and yeah,
Me too.
But yeah, no, I went, oh wow, okay, and just I did a podcast called Enterprise Incidents.
Yes,
with Scott and Steve, where me and my partner Steve Morris, we did a rewatch, complete scene by scene breakdown of every single episode of the original series.
So we can't do
and,
that.
And we went into production. We went by production order because it aired out of order.
Right, it did,
because
yeah.
it could.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there was no serialized. But we looked at it as a serialized show, and we saw that there's a lot of connecting the dots, and you can see the evolution of the original series and how it hit its stride.
Right.
With Gene Kuhn was really running the
Right.
show.
Can you see it in the actors' performances too? And
Like you just see how, when the show first started, Kirk was a little more dialed back. Okay, Shatner's performance was great, but he was more dialed back as season 1 went on, and when Gene Kuhn came on, like he took a more militaristic approach to the show. So when you watch like Errant of Mercy, that's a very sort of military sort of episode.
I'm not sure I know it, but
and Shatner was great. I mean, he was really. I think he just doesn't get the appreciation he deserves for what he did with that character.
Right.
I mean,
he's an icon. I mean, he was our first guest last year.
That must have been awesome.
It was great. I mean, a pinch yourself moment.
Oh,
kidding,
yeah.
To sit opposite the man, and we knew him a bit We followed him and Leonard around on Leonard's last hurrah for those 7 shows.
Yeah.
And, sometimes Bill would know who we were and sometimes he didn't.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But
I'd like some chips.
But
Okay, sure, Bill.
The nuances, the messages, the morality plays were lost on me as a kid. I mean, when I was growing up, I was really young. My brother and my dad, massive sports fans. All my friends were massive sports fan. I wasn't really into it. I tried to play, but I sucked at it. And then,
It was a tough time to be in Philly as a sports fan.
Oh, well, it still is. Obviously.
Well, we don't know yet.
What's the score? But with Star Trek, I was like, oh, here's a role model. That speech, the first episode I ever saw was Mirror, Mirror.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good episode.
It is.
It is.
But it's an atypical episode because you're in the mirror episode.
Right.
Okay. Right. But that speech at the end where he gives Spock, he's like, doesn't logic demand that you be a part of change? And he says, in every revolution, there's one man with a vision. I'm like, who is this guy? Holy shit. I'm like, who is this guy? I want to be this guy. Right. And guess what? I still do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he was my hero. He still is.
I want to bring it back to Metamorphosis for a second.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, watching it, that, back up for a second. We'd had Nana Visitor on the show, and she has a new book, Women in Trek, and it's really that's a piece of feminist literature.
It is,
and quite well done. I don't know if you've read it yet.
I have, and I just want to say about Nana's book, it is long overdue. And when I saw Nana at the Vegas STLV convention, I told her, I said, this is a groundbreaking book. This is a book this will change the game for Star Trek literature, so to speak.
No kidding.
The original series is not known for being forward-thinking because of the miniskirts.
But in its time,
the
miniskirts, yes, they were forward. They gave women license and franchise to be how they wanted to be.
But Eleanor Donahue's character in that episode, okay, was shot in 1967. May of 1967 is when they shot that episode. And here you have a diplomat trying to solve a war between two planets, and she's a woman. Mm-hmm. It was like, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris. Yeah, and this is 1967.
But the last line of the whole episode is kind of like, well, I guess they'll find another lady from the Federation.
Yeah. Now can't all be perfect. I know. You do go, well, they're leaving the woman behind.
Right. Funny you should mention that last moment. So on this podcast, Enterprise Incidents, with Scott and Steve, it's on Apple. So we
what he just did there?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
You like that?
Yeah.
So we had Ralph Senensky on for the entire duration of the conversation.
Oh, great.
Wow.
And so, the episode's only 49 minutes without credits. Yeah. We had a 2-hour and 47-minute conversation about Metamorphosis.
Wow.
So here's some trivia for you. So Ralph Senensky said that he wanted the episode to end when Zefram Cochrane says to Captain Kirk, he says, "Captain, don't tell them about me."
Right.
And he wanted the episode to end with, "Not a word, Mr. Cochrane." And they walk off. That's the end of the episode. But instead, what you get is McCoy says, "Oh, hey, Captain, what about that war in Epsilon Canaris 3?" And Kirk's like, "Well, they'll find someone else."
Figure this thing out. Yeah.
But you know what? I look. I mean, Ralph directed the episode. I think he's right.
How old is he, Dan?
He's 101.
Shut the front door, mate.
He's 101.
Good God.
He's incredible.
Sharp as a tack.
The recollections that he gave us. So Ralph Senensky, he directed 6 episodes full of the original series. He did This Side of Paradise, Metamorphosis, Bread and Circuses, Obsession, Return to Tomorrow, and Is There in Truth No Beauty from the 3rd season. And we had him on for a scene-by-scene breakdown for each one of the 6 episodes he directed. That, I don't think that's ever been done, that you have a living TOS director.
Right.
And like
What
he
background did he come out of TV directing before he got to Star Trek?
Oh, he did all that
Westerns and
stuff in the like Playhouse 90 stuff.
Oh, yeah.
They were very well
Phillips
respected, weren't they?
66
And he directed following Trek. He directed a bunch of episodes of the Waltons.
Oh, right.
You know, but okay. So he directed Return to Tomorrow, which is the one with Sargon.
Right.
Have no fear, Sargon is here. So that was the episode in where William Shatner delivered Kirk's "Risk is our business." That's what the starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her. He directed that episode, and he said Shatner got it in one take.
Oh.
And he says, I remember vividly, you know, like zooming the camera in very, very slowly as he was giving that speech. And that's one of the great Kirk speeches.
Yeah.
Risk is our business. I mean, it's amazing. And I would say, you know, for 80 episodes, if you include The Cage, the one with Jeffrey Hunter as Pike, for as many episodes to hold up as they do is incredible. I mean, there's a couple episodes
There's
that
some
don't.
clunkers, as there always are.
Like Mudd's Women, not a great episode. What's the one I really
Mudd's
hate?
fun though, isn't he? I mean, it's a nice performance.
yeah.
But you agree to the
Yeah, we're looking for husbands. You know, like, oh my God, I can't watch it. But you know, Metamorphosis, like I said, it's and Eleanor Donahue, who was best known for Father Knows
right.
Best, like the way that she plays Commissioner Hedford, like she's very in the beginning, she's very, very tense, very, very harsh, you know, and then when she has that breakdown in the middle of the episode
And no
where
one
she's
loves
like,
me.
I blew it.
I've never been loved, and I've
Right.
never loved.
I've never been loved. I've wasted my life, and she rolls over and starts crying. And McCoy's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then when she appears in the doorway after she's been possessed, if you will, by the companion, she's lovely. I mean, this is a lot of range for a 49-minute episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you, on our panel this last year in Vegas, you said that there have been how many episodes of Star Trek on TV?
Connor, this is amazing. I'm surprised more people don't talk about this, but there have been more than I forget what the number I gave you was.
More than Law and Order.
I don't know how many Law and Orders there are, but Star Trek has way
It was like
more than
1,038 episodes.
it was.
or
It was
something.
like maybe it was like 920 something,
a lot.
but more than 900. Close to 1,000 episodes.
That's amazing.
Close to 1,000. So, you know, coming up, you got another season of Strange New Worlds, which I love that show.
I
Strange New
have
Worlds.
to say,
it's great.
I'm liking it. I'm watching it now.
You know, you got this new Starfleet Academy show, and what's the other one?
Enterprise.
Enterprise, the Return of Enterprise. But
They
so
always have to be reminded.
so the question is, what do you think Star Trek should do for its 1,000th episode?
Wow.
Like, how do you mark that occasion? Like when it was
That's a
the
very good question.
it-
In
it-
fact, I think that you asked this on our panel.
I did.
Yeah.
That's a big question.
I
like,
wouldn't even know where to start with that. I mean, obviously, you know, the current writers, they're not looking back in any respect. They're only looking forward.
Yeah, they're not. They're
And
not
I
looking
respect
back.
that. I mean, Star Trek should be holding a mirror up to the society it's, you know, currently representing. I think that's important.
Yeah.
But
But
how
the
do you
caveat?
end? How do you end season 3 of Picard, which Terry Matalas executive produced, which was, in my opinion, the finest season of the new shows
Surely.
since 2017.
Agreed.
So how do you set up the Enterprise G with Captain 7 of 9 and not keep going? Like, it's this, you know, they're calling it Star Trek
Right.
Legacy.
Right.
Like, where the hell is that show? I would be all in for a Star Trek Legacy show. Are you kidding, guys?
Well, we had Michelle Hurd and Michael Dorn on, and you know their relationship in season 3 of Picard. You know,
that could spin
Buddy
off
Cop.
quite happily.
You know, you could do anything like that. I think that there should be something of an homage to the captains that are left i.e., in the last scene of the last episode of Picard, where they're playing cards.
Yeah.
Where there's just it's just almost a montage of the people that have been responsible in the captain's chair for all that we've had.
Listen, the fact that we're talking about approaching 1,000 episodes of Star Trek. Now, you talk at the top of this conversation, you mentioned how, the writers and producers of the Berman era have been there since the beginning. A lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, that's definitely true, but they still found ways to do things that were different. I mean, while also looking back, I mean, look at that Deep Space Nine episode with the Tribbles, Trials and Tribulations.
right.
That was great.
Yeah.
I think you can keep moving forward and still dip your toe in the waters of the past.
Well, of course, you can be a touchstone for what's happening right now and a touchstone for what has been before at the same time, and I think that they managed that pretty well. Our show was completely affected by and changed the tone through 9/11. You had the things happening in the 90s with Deep Space Nine, and you had the Cold War in the 60s, and they all represent.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, I don't know if I asked you this on stage, Manny Cotto, can you guys talk about the exhilaration that kind of came in when he really took over?
I ran the writer's room, and I forget which script it was in season 3. It was a Zindi script, and I remember reading that going, this is new. Who wrote this? Manny Cotto. I don't know, who's he?
Yeah.
I ran the writer's room, the writer's building, and said, can I speak to him? And
wow.
Yeah, and said, welcome aboard, mate.
Nice.
Nice.
That's
this is
great.
Fresh stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too bad. God bless. And to be given the reins and running the show, and it was new blood, and he was a huge Star Trek fan.
Clearly.
I wasn't, what's the word, aware that there were so many loose ends in our show that fans were slightly up in arms about, but he managed to apparently just tie that all up with a big bow and make it look like it was all, When
T'Pol goes back to Vulcan for the Pon farr, I was like, now we're talking here.
Yeah.
This is great.
Right.
But it doesn't take anything away from Enterprise. It just ties.
Yeah.
This is what the show is supposed to do, tie into, what we're going to see. And
Right.
that's what that season especially
If we hadn't
did.
been at the mercy of, network television
Yeah.
and ratings and
Right.
commercials and, all the rest of it, and the fact that, there was no one left at Paramount that was our,
champion.
Yeah, we lost Kerry McCluggage.
Yeah, no.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In our
Karen
first
McCullough.
year.
But Mr. Mumbis had no interest in it. He didn't commission it. He didn't care for it. And it was a shame. The landscape was changing, and we sadly
the
fell in the
thing
gap.
is with you had 13 Star Trek films official, if you don't include Galaxy Quest, which is a great Star Trek movie. Let's face it. But Star Trek belonged on TV. I mean, I was thrilled when I heard that Star Trek was going back to TV. But TV has changed. You guys are doing 24, 26 episodes a
yeah,
season.
yeah. They're doing 10 now.
Now they're doing 10.
Yeah.
Which was interesting because
With a lot of money.
It's a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Right. Ron Moore was doing a panel for the Generations movie, and someone asked him, how is it doing 10 episodes of For All Mankind versus doing 26 episodes of Next Generation? And he said, without missing a beat, he said, it takes just as long. It takes just as long to do 10 episodes of television today than it did to do 26 back in the day.
So they're not operating on the 7-day schedule.
No, well, according to him, the way he said it was we still had to take just as long to shoot it, to produce it, to write it out. But in the end, and this is where the strike really came into play, you're still only getting paid for 10 episodes, even though it takes just as long.
Yes, right.
That was the
I
problem.
would have appreciated 4 pages as opposed to 9.
Exactly. but also in terms of, because Star Trek belongs on TV, whereas, and I love Star Wars, but Star Wars belongs in the movies.
Yeah.
And I loved Andor, and I loved the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. But with each passing show, I thought the last movie wasn't that great. I feel like you're diluting
All right.
the great. Star Wars was special.
Yeah.
Like when when the original film came out, it changed everything.
Everything.
And then Empire was like next level stuff,
Right.
right? And then Jedi, while not as good as Empire, it was
the
still.
Ewoks. See, George Lucas's thing with puppets. I don't understand.
I to this day, Connor, whenever I try to watch Return of the Jedi, and I get to the part where you see the little wicked feet walk in, I
Yeah.
go, no,
Yeah, I'm
stop.
done. I'm done.
Done.
But I think that we've, like, for instance, not to say that it's a great film, but I enjoyed it. Wolves, which is Clooney and Pitt, and
Fine.
Yeah, I saw it.
it was fine. It was fine, but it was released on streaming service.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's also a point when I've been told about these movies that people are in love with that I never knew about because they're buried in Netflix. They're
Right.
buried in their library. They get there for a week and then you don't see them again.
Yeah.
That is my biggest bone to pick with the streaming services. Like, you could have all this build up for a movie, but when it drops on Netflix, it disappears.
Yeah.
It disappears. So there's a movie that came out this year. It's called Hitman
Yeah.
with
Saw it.
Yeah.
Glenn Powell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Movie was excellent.
Yeah.
I thought
Loved it. I
it-
actually went to a BAFTA screening of it. I thought it was terrific.
The scene
Saw
with the
Q&A
cell
with them
phone?
all, and
yeah.
right?
It's
Remember?
brilliant.
It's a brilliant
It's
movie.
a brilliant film.
And so leading up to the day that it dropped in June on Netflix,
It just disappeared,
it
didn't it?
just
I
disappeared.
know.
did.
It's sad.
Here's why that happens. Because when a movie's released in theaters, for example, Joker 2, that movie bombed at the box office. And as a result of the performance at the box office, the press kept writing about it after its release. When a movie opens really big, you get the build up, the press leading up to the day that it opens in theaters, and then, this is how it did in week 1. This is how it's doing in week 2. This is how it's doing in 3. It's really hanging in there. So like for another 3 or 4 weeks, you're still getting press out of it, and people they know where to see it because they know it's at a theater. They just got to look up which theater. But how many times have you're sitting at home and you've got, let's say, Netflix or Amazon or Hulu or Disney Plus open, and you're scrolling across, you're scrolling down, scrolling across, scrolling
Things
down.
for you.
Oh.
Yeah, right. Things for you. Continue watching.
I always make sure before supper's got to the table, we've picked it out because supper will go cold by the time you found something.
Yeah.
Right. Or you know what? I can't tell you how many times. This is the truth. I'm sitting there, I'm going through like Netflix, I'm going through Amazon, and maybe there's a movie that I'm kind of interested in, and then in the end I flip over to Paramount Plus and I watch one of the Star Treks.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, screw this. I just
Right.
go and I'll watch like
Enterprise.
I'll watch Enterprise. But I mean, like I did a rewatch of Enterprise during the lockdown, and I hadn't seen it like the complete since it aired.
Right.
So you get things
God
out
bless
of
you,
it.
mate.
Same thing with Deep Space Nine. I mean, look, we all had a lot of time on our hands for that year.
Yeah.
But more recently, last year, I did a rewatch of Next Gen. Same thing. I mean, I always go back and I just watch the episodes I like. But to rewatch it and see the arc of the show and the characters, especially as the show got more serialized, starting with Deep Space Nine, but into Voyager and your show. But it really was amazing to go back and rewatch Next Gen and see that abrupt shift in quality from season 2 into season 3. Season 3, my God. I mean, yesterday's Enterprise, Best of Both Worlds 1. One of the episodes I rediscovered was the first episode that Jonathan Frakes directed,
Okay.
The Offspring.
As soon as season 3, he was getting in the chair. I didn't know
Yep.
that.
That was the one.
Right.
That was the one.
God bless.
That episode, The Offspring, was and actually I realized it aired the week after yesterday's Enterprise. So you're getting like great episode after great. I'm like, now we're talking. With that show. I remember, my friends at Penn State were like, wow, this show got really good. Yeah.
What's your take on this notion of legacy Trek versus new Trek?
Well, boy, that is a loaded question.
We've got some time.
My friend. I think this is a very diplomatic way of answering it, but I really
Is there bad blood? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know Terry's
there
gone to
is, or else
Marvel.
you wouldn't have asked.
Yeah.
There is. I see it because I'm in the chat rooms and the Facebook pages and the comment sections and the and at the conventions too. There is a division between the people who are really committed to the Berman era to people who were really got into it because of the Kurtzman era. Mm-hmm. But in the end, it's all Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I just think that if you give it time, people are going to come around. They're going to come around to Discovery because I think Discovery is the show that people were the most sort of averse to.
Yeah.
Whereas Strange New Worlds, they were more open to it because it was like you guys. It was like a throwback.
Right.
It was like, okay, it's more familiar to them. It's on a starship and you're out in space and all that. But I think I think they needed to have a different take. They definitely did. And each show is different. I mean, Prodigy, season 2 of Prodigy.
It's great.
Which isn't even on Paramount Plus.
Right.
No,
which
they
is
let it go.
What?
I know.
Why would they do that?
I don't know.
That pisses me off. Like Paramount Plus, among other things, let's face it, all of Star Trek should be in one place.
Yes.
All of it. Because honestly, guys, the only reason I subscribe to Paramount Plus is because of Star Trek. Right. And I got all the Blu-rays, I got all the DVDs.
And the Champions League.
What's that?
And the Champions League. It's soccer.
Oh, the Champions League. But it should all be in one place. And when they let Prodigy go to Netflix, and I watched season 2 of Prodigy, and I'm like, I don't know, did they know that this was going to happen? Because I feel like they've really pulled a Manny-Cotto. They just went for it.
Yes.
And it was beautiful.
Yeah, they make some odd decisions
No
over
kidding.
there.
No
They historically always have done.
Oh,
And,
it's just there's you know who Mark Cushman is?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote those 3 books on the original series.
Yeah.
These are the voyages.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is like magnificent.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
That's where our last episode comes from.
oh, okay. Hold that thought. Like reading some of the interviews that Mark Cushman got for his books, and especially when you get into the 3rd season, reading how people were saying like Paramount hated us, Paramount wanted to get rid of us, NBC hated us. Like how could you hate that show? How could you look at that show? Look at these characters. I mean, especially the 3 guys. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, Shatner, Nimoy, D. Kelly. Their chemistry was fantastic.
Fantastic.
An unpopular opinion,
It was just so against the grain of what else was on telly at the time.
but unpopular opinion.
Right.
I have always felt this way. I loved your last episode.
Did you now?
Yes, I did.
Explain yourself, sir.
I will tell you why.
I had no problem with it.
It was not what I was expecting. It was just not what I was expecting for a series finale. I just felt like it was a beautiful frame.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what we thought.
But I still feel
since-
this way. I still feel this way.
I've since taken umbrage a bit, maybe on Scott's behalf, that I think he was disrespected. He's a puppet in this show and being stopped and started. And if I'd been him, and he was pissed off at the time,
I get it.
I think he and Connor and I were like, we're series regular people now. We'll get another job.
Yeah.
And I can understand why he was ticked off.
I get it. I completely get it. And I get why you don't like the episode too.
I have no problem with it.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because Trip is the only character in Enterprise that had a complete arc of a storyline. You didn't have to wonder. I mean,
Blaze of Glory.
there's a book. There's an actual story of this person's life, and that's why I like it. Selfishly,
I remember
it is all about
when it first aired in 2005. I mean, I was sad that it was over, but I was watching These Are the Voyages, going like, well, that was really like a beautiful way to tie it.
It was an homage to their tenure, and yeah,
But
it was.
yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, it should be.
It was
totally,
an odd, clunky device to have it.
I get it. I
was.
get it.
It
I understand.
But they didn't have long to dream it up either. We had 6 weeks
Right.
from the minute we were told we were
Right.
done. And what's the last episode going to be? Never mind what are the 4 in between.
But I just
know.
felt like it was like if none of the other shows ended that way.
No.
You know, I mean, that was a big swing.
And
It was.
did you think that, because, I mean, that could have been in the end of Star Trek. That might have been it. It really might.
That could have been it.
That could have been it.
Even though that season was like,
There was no B.J.
Let's
Trimble
go.
sending fan
No.
mail and
Right.
organising and no.
no, you know your stuff.
Yeah.
Bijou.
bless her.
Bijou. Like, can you just imagine, like, trying to save a show like that in
Amazing.
the 60s?
Well, we had
And-
that happen.
Yeah.
They
Well, they
raised
were picketing
$1
outside
million
the-
and
they
they
were-
picketed
yeah.
outside of Paramount.
They did. This
and,
is true. I'd forgotten
Just
that.
didn't work.
They raised,
Right,
what did that
right.
$1
$1 million.
bucks get? Did you get some?
That's the money that I had in my checking account. And Shatner asked about my horses.
But I just, you know, it's funny. I pride myself at times, not all the time, but in certain ways. I like to be a contrarian. You know, if there's a movie that everyone hates, I'll kind of like be like, hang on a second. I was like that with Eyes Wide Shut back in '99.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah,
a popular film.
It was not.
No.
But if you watch it, if you give it some time or go back to it, you know, just like the best of Kubrick, you get more and more out of it over the
Surely.
years. And I saw the film had that potential when I first saw it, and now a lot of people really like it. But with the Enterprise,
Cinematically, it's a fantastic film.
it's
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick directed It's a Wonderful Life.
Mm.
The result would be Eyes Wide Shut.
That's very good. I like it.
That's my
I
take
might-
on
I'm
Eyes
gonna
Wide
steal
Shut.
that.
What's your take on the new Joker? It's been getting vilified.
Oh, it was. I did not like
You
it
didn't
at
like
all.
it?
No.
Do you know,
no.
I just I'm going to a BAFTA screening of it next Sunday. I'm going to
Oh.
go just because
You should.
I should.
See it for
He
yourself.
backed out of it, didn't he?
Phillips.
Yeah.
Well, would you go after your movie
No,
bombed?
and also not River, Joaquin. He tried to get himself out of it, and then went back in to
I
the
didn't
actual
know that.
making of it. Yeah, it was on KCRW the other day. He's just backed out of another movie, which
Oh,
he's
right.
gonna-
He backed out as Luca Guadagnino. I think
Yes,
was going to direct.
because he's quite. I like the fact that he'll go and do some very odd.
Oh, Todd Haynes.
Todd
Haynes was
Todd
going to
Haynes.
direct that movie.
Yeah, but yeah, he was going to back out of this Joker too, and then somehow they talked him back in.
I just felt like the movie didn't go anywhere.
Right. It's
just,
a musical too, isn't it?
It's a musical. You have Lady Gaga in a film, and
I
Lady,
don't mind Gaga. She can act.
She can act. I mean, she was nominated for
Yeah.
Stars Born.
Yeah.
She won the Oscar for that song.
Yeah.
And a Grammy. Well, she's got a lot of Grammys. But
I liked her in the Versace movie too. I have to say.
how do you underutilize Lady Gaga? That's one of the problems.
That's
this
a
movie
crime.
has.
It is it? They underutilize it.
But you know, we're getting into this, and you guys are going to probably get a lot of invites to like SAG screenings
Right.
and stuff like that. Like we're in Oscar season right now.
yes, it's
Right.
getting
There's
there.
a lot of good
Yeah,
stuff
right
coming out.
there.
Like just to mark this down. So you got a movie called September 5th,
Right.
which is about the Munich Olympics from
Yeah.
'72,
Yeah.
from the point of view of the ABC Sports control room, which is what gives it a unique spin.
Oh, wow.
Excellent film. Peter Sarsgaard, John Magaro, great. Movie called Amelia Perez. If I was going to give the Oscar for Best Picture right now,
You'd go with-
it would be to this movie, Amelia Perez.
Okay.
It is magnificent. It is a Netflix movie, and it is their best chance to date that they will have in winning finally the Oscar for Best Picture.
God bless.
It is extraordinary film.
Do you go to Cannes and all the film festivals?
I went to Cannes once,
Right.
and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But I go to Sundance every year,
Right.
Telluride, Toronto, South by Southwest. Those are the 4 that I will not miss.
Right.
Because, like, 2 years ago at South by Southwest, the opening night film was Everything Everywhere All at Once,
Oh.
which won 7 Oscars,
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
Best Picture.
Now, do the streaming services, do they have to release it in...
for a week.
For a week.
Is it a weekend?
For
I
a
thought it was
week.
2 actually, but it's only
They
a
might have
week.
changed it, but they do have to, like this movie.
Isn't there
Amelia-
money to be made for them to have it in release, or is there like, no, we want people signing up and watching Netflix rather than going to the cinema.
I think like Amazon Prime, their model is that they'll release the movie in theaters for at least a month, if not longer, before it drops on the service.
Right.
But Netflix, they put it in some theaters for a small period of time, but then it's all Netflix. Right. And I just think so this movie Amelia Perez, I saw it on a big screen. I saw it at Telluride, and I'm like, yeah, when it drops on Netflix, I'm going to see it, but it's not going to be the same experience.
Stars in it, or is it?
Well, speaking of Star Trek, Zoe Saldana,
Right.
and she is.
I think I've heard about this film now. She's fabulous.
She's great.
Right.
She's great.
Right.
She's really, really great. But this is the time. What's great about creation in the Vegas show is I'm doing what I do with KTLA and moderating a lot of these FYC Q&As, but starting in 2015, Adam and Gary are like, why don't you come back and do some moderating for us?
It's been great to see you there.
And I was like, I love doing it.
Yeah.
I just love doing it. It's so fun.
And you're so
Speaking
good
of
at it.
KTLA, we don't have a lot of time left, but can you talk about Sam Rubin?
Sam Rubin.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, Sam Rubin has been with KTLA since they first started the morning news in 1991. So he's been there the entire time. I met Sam in the early O's. I think the first time I met him was actually at a screening for the first Spider-Man movie. So this is April of 2002. And just over the years, we were at the same screenings, the same events, the same premieres, and we got to know each other really well. And, he would always ask me, what's good? What should I see? He really expected my expertise. And when I left Access, he called me up one day and said, so what are you doing now? I said, well, a lot of freelancing. And he goes, good, you can do stuff for us.
Oh, great.
So that was a little more than 6 years ago. So Sam is the reason I'm at KTLA. Sam and the senior producer, Grace Mendoza, and Jason Ball, who was the news director at the time, they brought me in. And, I was doing once a week reviews. And, it was great. I loved going in there. And then the pandemic happened, and I thought movie theaters are completely shut down.
Yeah.
There goes my livelihood. And I just figured, well, that's that. They're not going to have me back until this blows over. But they had me Skype in every week to talk about movies that were streaming. So I owe them a lot for that.
God bless.
But then, the day he passed, I was filling in for him that morning. And when I left, I got home and I heard. And they said...
It was a complete shock, wasn't it? I mean, he had a heart attack. And
I've never had a loss of someone I knew that sudden in my life.
Right.
And for it to be someone who really meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
He was closest I had to a mentor.
Right.
Again, he brought me in, and I love working with those people.
You could tell he was just a mensch, a
Total
real,
mensch.
Yeah.
Total mensch. The word that I use to describe Sam Rubin, generous.
Right.
He was a generous guy. He had me do the Oscar red carpet shows and the Emmy red carpet shows, and on the days when he wasn't there in the morning, if he was on vacation, they would have other people fill in, and I was one of them.
Yeah,
and I'm still filling in for him.
His love of the industry and the content and the movies, and it translates with you too, Scott. It's palpable, it's visceral, and that's why you're so wonderful to talk to.
Yeah.
And why he was so watchable, and you are too. So
thank you. I mean, really,
it's real.
When I went back the day that he passed, and I was, they had for the next 3.5 days, all they did was talk about him. Yeah. And, they had people calling in who knew him and worked with him. They had people who work with him now or worked with him in the past would go into the studio. So that day when I went back and, Frank Buckley and Eric Spillman were handling the reins. And I was sitting there and Frank said, Scott, I know you were filling in for him this morning. And Frank said, I can tell you that filling in for Sam is not something he would trust with just anybody. And when he said, even though I've been doing it for a while from time to time, the way he said it really hit me because I realized at that moment how much he trusted me with that responsibility, and that he would not let just anybody do that. And I'm aware of that every time I go in. Every time I mean, when I go in on the, I'll be there tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And I go in, I sit at his desk.
God bless me.
And it's untouched. It's exactly the way he left it.
Oh my gosh.
And everyone there just loves him. And they had 2 events in the last couple weeks to honor him. One was at the studio, one was at Musso and Frank's, and just the outpouring of love. And when he did pass, like, all the people on like social media, not just actors and people in entertainment, but like the mayor, Barack Obama, said something. I mean, like, you realize that how many people actually he is LA.
Yeah.
I mean, there was for the tagline for KTLA is LA's very own, but Sam Rubin was definitely LA's very own.
Well, I will say this: the baton has been appropriately passed.
Yeah.
Oh,
no
well, thanks.
kidding.
I mean, it's not. I mean, there's still there.
In any role that you're doing with this. And,
thank you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you wind up being the entertainment.
Well, I gotta say, when with Vegas, they have a bunch of moderators doing through the weekend, and when I was talking to Gary back in July, and they were putting together the schedule, I went into their office, and he showed me like how things were looking, and who's going to do this. Ian Spelling, who's a really great friend. I know you guys know him too. But I saw the 4 of you guys. I'm like, I got to do Enterprise.
Oh, bless
I
you.
said, I got to do Enterprise. Because
You're a good laugh.
yeah, you are. But it's just like, let's put it this way. It's just to kind of like wrap this conversation in a bow here. If it wasn't for Star Trek, I wouldn't be here talking to you, because
Likewise.
when I started watching as a 6-year-old kid with Mirror Mirror, then I started holding up my tape recorder up to the TV so I could record this way before VCRs.
Wow.
I would record the episodes on a tape recorder, and that's how I memorized the dialogue.
No kidding.
And then I started going to the conventions, and just by chance they were creation shows. And then I reached out to Creation and said, hey, you need someone like me? And they did, and then they moved me out here.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
Yes, exactly.
It all started because of Star Trek.
Brilliant.
There you go. LL and P brothers.
That's right. Man, thank you so much for coming
Thank you,
in.
Scott.
Really,
God
what a
bless you,
thrill.
man.
The thrill is mine. And guys,
Really.
keep going boldly.
Likewise. Likewise.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Thank you.
Time for trivia. What influential member of the Duras family does Mork suspect conspired with the Romulans to overthrow the Klingon Empire?
Dun 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 dun.
Kapla.